Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. Fighting continues in the Syrian town of Kobani, fighting between ISIS and Kurdish forces. Joining me now to talk about the situation is Oubai Shahbandar. He's just returned, and he is the communications director of the Syria, let me get this, make sure I get this right, the Free Syria Foreign Mission. Okay, you've just returned. What is your conclusion of the situation?
Well, Katie, I just returned from the region. I spent some time in southern Turkey on the border region and in Jordan, speaking with a variety of Syrian opposition members and Free Syrian Army commanders who are playing such an integral role in the fight against ISIS in Syria. What they tell me is that, look, the real front lines against ISIS is not just in Iraq, but is in northern and eastern Syria. U.S. and allied airstrikes have significantly intensified in the past 2 weeks in northern Syria against frontline positions where ISIS is concentrating its forces to overrun the Syrian town of Kobani, as well as other towns in northern Syria that aren't really receiving a lot of media attention. Now, ISIS has been hurt. There's no question about it. The airstrikes have forced ISIS to disperse. They're changing their tactics and procedures. But let there be no question about it. ISIS is very much determined to establish a ground presence and expand its ground presence in northern and eastern Syria. The fight in Kobani is ongoing with another fight against ISIS in northern Aleppo province. Now, what the folks down there tell me is that the airstrikes are needed, but what is needed from the United States, in addition to the strikes, is closer coordination with those forces on the ground. Now, you have Kurdish forces that are fighting ISIS, but those Kurdish forces are also fighting alongside Free Syrian Army units, and in some areas with Sunni Arab tribes who have joined their brethren in Iraq, the Sunni tribes in Iraq, to fight ISIS. So the real winning strategy, what everyone on the ground is asking for, is for the United States and for the local Arab allies, the regional Arab allies, to coordinate those airstrikes and to expand military aid to those boots on the ground that are already in existence in Syria, that are taking the fight to ISIS on a daily basis.
You know, one of the arguments is that the military equipment, United States military equipment, hasn't reached those groups, that they're up against very well-armed ISIS fighters because they have state-of-the-art American equipment they took from the fleeing Iraqi army, but the Kurds, the Free Syrian groups, some of the Sunni tribes don't have that equipment. Was that sort of what you were hearing from them?
That's absolutely the case, and that's why these airstrikes have been absolutely so critical. ISIS has been able to expand throughout Syria and Iraq precisely because it has been able to capture heavy American military equipment from Iraqi military bases. And that's why ISIS has been able to besiege major towns like Kobani and Aleppo, and in the eastern city in Syria, Deir ez-Zor, because they're using artillery. They're using heavy caliber machine guns that they've captured. They have Humvees, they have tanks, and they know how to use them. What they do, they set up the artillery, and they just heavily bombard an area. And they have no shortage of ammunition, by the way. And then they move in quickly with a strike force. If it wasn't for American and Arab allied airstrikes, the town of Kobani would have fallen. And the same is ongoing in northern Aleppo province, where the Free Syrian Army is playing that frontline role against ISIS. So, like you said, the balance sheet is still very much in the favor of ISIS. So what is needed, in addition to this airstrikes, is for a real U.S. policy shift to move heavy weaponry in the hands of the freedom fighters in Syria, both the Free Syrian Army and the tribes, who are so critical to ensure that not only ISIS is not able to expand in a vacuum in Syria, but they're also critical to ensure that the Assad regime, which has played such a pernicious role in exporting terrorism throughout the region, that the Assad regime does not have the necessary opportunity to move into those areas as well.
Well, what happens if Kobani falls?
It will be an absolutely unmitigated disaster. Two things, two reasons. One, ISIS has been very clear that they will ethnically cleanse that area. We've seen it before. It will be a genocide. We've seen ISIS do it before. And they've done it not just to Kurds, but to Arab tribesmen that have risen up and fought them. Just earlier this summer, ISIS slaughtered 700 Sunni Arab tribesmen in Deir ez-Zor, a province in eastern Syria. And they're crucifying people that dare to stand up to their perverted vision of Islam. So strategically, it will also be it would also have a very negative impact. ISIS has been besieging Kobani for weeks at this point. It would be a huge propaganda coup if Kobani falls to ISIS. Luckily, in the past couple of days, we've seen ISIS being steadily pushed back because of the American airstrikes and because of the freedom fighters and the Kurdish forces that are fighting ISIS there. But you need to sustain that, because airstrikes alone, like any military strategist or operator will tell you, are simply insufficient. ISIS is very smart. They adapt, they move quickly, and they know how to use asymmetric warfare. So the United States needs to be 2 steps ahead of ISIS if you're really going to defeat this force.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You've just returned from the region, and that's an up-to-date report on the fighting going on in the entire region, Turkey, Syria, Kurdish regions, etc. Oubai Shahbandar, and he is the communications director of the Free Syrian, what is the title again?
The Free Syrian Formation, Syrian Opposition.
The Syrian Opposition, Syrian Rebels. You're communications director of the Syrian Rebels. That's good enough for me. That's it for DEFCON 3.
Thank you.